Welcome to Woo New, a show that explores healing and the expansion of our consciousness.
Where we explore all kinds of different energy modalities, therapies, and ideas that bring us closer to our collective liberation.
I'm Ellen, and I'm a journey work guide.
I'm Sam, and I am an integrative energy therapist.
And together, we are the co-creators of We Are All Daughters,
a quantum healing space dedicated to helping us reconnect to ourselves, our bodies, each other, and the universe.
I cannot and have not been able to wait for this conversation with Buki Fadipe, who has become a dear friend through, again, the magic of Instagram, which I always find so ironic because it gets vilified so much. But I truly have just been making so many incredible connections through that platform. And so I feel like I have to just kind of give it up for Instagram sometimes. She is the voice and the creator behind Adventures in Om, which is a resource for those seeking the tools, inspiration, guidance, and education in support of their growth and expansion. She's an integration guide who I just recently got the pleasure and honor of co-facilitating in one of her integration circles. She is a sacred medicine facilitator and a decolonized educator and writer. And I think it was February, or no, maybe it was January, I was able to attend one of her classes called The Rites of Passage, where we were learning about the sacred rituals and rites of Indigenous cultures that very much includes entheogenic medicines. And as you all know by now, entheogenic medicines are very near and dear to Sam and I's hearts, as we are very much realizing and stepping into our stewardship of the sacred mushroom together. And in this new membership, Patreon membership circle that we just launched yesterday too. So just so grateful and honored to be in this space with you, Buki, as I feel like you have so much to share and to teach all of us in regards especially to this decriminalization movement, this psychedelic spread and movement. And I even hesitate to call it a movement, but it's really kind of a coming back home to these ancient medicines. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Ellen. I'm so grateful to be here with you and Sam, and very much looking forward to sharing and to I guess giving a little bit of an insight into why it is I do what I do. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh my gosh, we always love to geek out about this stuff, so I'm so excited.
Yeah, this class, I mean, I just don't even want to go back to this rites of passage class that you were called to create, Buki. It was such a beautiful offering that I know that, you know, it was, I think, the second time you had done this class. And I just so appreciate learning about the different ancient, like Indigenous cultures and the way the medicines were woven into their culture. And just even in the simple definition, I know I keep on coming back to this and we've talked about this before, but entheogenic, meaning bring forth the divine within, I think was such a light bulb moment for me, because I think in some ways I feel like what is being really talked about right now in this, you know, and I'm using air quotes here, psychedelic movement, feels sometimes that it's not really focused on this idea of bring forth the divine within and on so many other things. And so, you know, we usually like to start at the beginning, but I just kind of want to hear a little bit about your perspective right now on what you're seeing in this space, and and then we'll wind our way back into history about how you even got here.
Yeah, sure. No, I hear you, and I completely agree. I mean, of course, I completely agree. Hence, um, I think I felt the need to build and create that offering, the rites of passage course that you came on. And I completely agree, because I think what we're seeing, what's actually being sort of, it's proliferated into the space, is this more clinical perspective on how these medicines work, which obviously we kind of need. We need that medical lens in order to understand how they work on the brain, how they reconfigure our neurons and synapses, so that we heal from, treatment resistant illnesses like depression, PTSD, anxiety, and so on. So that information is very much needed. But what is happening is, as they're sort of entering the mainstream and the focus is being put primarily on the neuroscience, we're really seeing them being sort of reduced into molecules, molecular components, rather than actually, and that sort of completely eradicates any sort of spiritual insight, any, and I'm not saying this is a blanketing, it depends where you go and read your news and where you're absorbing your information, of course. But I think overall what we're seeing is a desecularization of the medicines themselves. And in that, it means removing the thing on, like I said, the medicinal value. We're seeing, them appropriated to a certain degree, being stripped away of their heritage. And these medicines have been used in Indigenous cultures for millennia. And this is globally. This isn't even just, because I kind of see this tokenistic approach. Whenever you hear about psilocybin now, they'll always speak a little bit, no disrespect to the Aztecs. Yes, they really kind of were gatekeepers for this medicine, but there are other cultures that have been using psilocybin, and you don't really, it's not a nuanced perspective. It's very Eurocentric, very a white dominated narrative, I would say. I say this because the space is quite patriarchal in terms of, the people at the upper echelons, in terms of the trials, in terms of policy making. It's all white men predominantly, so that really, if you kind of think about a top-down approach, that really kind of shapes the way that the narrative and the discourse enters the mainstream. And I think it's a huge shame, because part of the magic and the beauty and the wisdom of these medicines is in understanding their heritage, understanding their history. Because I very much feel, I'm it's not even a feeling, I believe that these medicines are sentient, and they interact with you in a way, it's in a very reciprocal kind of way. It's a two-way conversation, it's a dialogue, it's a relationship that you end up building. And they, in a sense, will only present, I'm trying to be careful of what I say here, because it's not, it's not fact. But what I think we discussed this before, Ellen, that the approach that you have with them is almost what they sort of reflect back at you. Yeah. So when I first started on this medicine journey, I did come from quite a science-based sort of angle. And remember, my journeys were very, very different. They did have quite a spiritual tone, but they deepened and expanded, cosmically since then, as I've also deepened into my own decolonized ritualistic ceremonial work. So that's why I say it's such a shame, because it's a missing element. I mean, you cannot actually extract the sacred and spiritual element from these medicines, no matter how you try. I think even, your most hardened sort of atheists, and even Michael Pollan, I think, wrote about this in his book, right? About people that he spoke to and interviewed that were staunch atheists that then experienced the medicine and spoke, at length about meeting, a sacred entity, meeting God, meeting deities, all sorts of things. So this was the reason for rites of passage, really, to give a more nuanced education, a decolonized sort of learning journey and experience of these medicines, and also, speaking to the diversity of them. There's only so deep that we can go, because it's 4 modules, it's a 9-hour course, but if you remember, we talked on psilocybin, we touched a bit on iboga, and for sure actually also spoke to just the spiritual aspect, being the ritualistic kind of approach, the animistic belief system and cosmologies of all these different indigenous cultures, and how these medicines sort of came to support them, I guess, in building, their outlook, building their myths, and archetypal frameworks. I mean, some cultures, like the Mayans, for example, they took this so seriously. They spent hundreds of years experimenting with all sorts of different plants and medicines, that assisted them in sort of formulating and building their I don't want to call it their spiritual sort of system. So, and obviously this is, I can speak from this perspective in depth because it's of interest to me. I'm sure your average person doesn't necessarily have time to spend, but I do think that we need to shift from this medicalized model. We might not be able to right away, because actually it's the medicalized model that's allowing for the changes in legislature. The FDA approval is more likely to go ahead if they have facts and stats, scientific evidence, than if they have subjective reports of people meeting God and
Right.
like healing ancestral wounds. It's just not the way our modern society works, unfortunately. But I do feel that it's a push and pull. I feel that it's important. I feel it primarily that it's really important, almost as a means to harm reduction, because these experiences can actually also lead to ontological shock. Can you imagine? I have people that I'm coaching, preparing to meet the medicine, who are wanting to meet the medicine almost to test drive it, as these are staunch atheists that don't believe in a greater force, or it's the Big Bang Theory and reductionist sort of science kind of logic, but their curiosity has been aroused because of what they've been reading from the trials, what they've been reading from people like Michael Pollan and Terence McKenna, and there is that lure to sort of experience that other world. But I also think if you're not prepared to cope with it, if you're not prepared, you haven't tried communicating with your ancestors, you don't even have a belief in a higher power, suddenly sort of maybe taking a macro dose that plunges you into those realms will actually be less enjoyable than if you had some previous sort of understanding and history of that. So I really think that there's so many different reasons, apart from the obvious being that these medicines have been stewarded by Indigenous cultures for millennia, and this extraction and colonization of these medicines is completely sort of removing them from the dominant narrative. But also, as I've just said, about the value that's missing. I mean, I could go on and on, because they've even been trials. I think some of the very first trials at Johns Hopkins were actually conducted to ascertain whether, a spiritual experience could be as potent in terms of its healing value on patients with treatment resistant depression, and also patients, I think, that were near death, cancer patients.
Wow,
and
yeah.
near end of life, sorry, not near death. So it's really interesting. I mean, those were the very first few trials, and this is back in, like, I don't know, 1999. No, I can't remember the exact date, 1998 or something like that.
Yeah, I think I read about that, the cancer patients, and how like after working with the medicine, so many of them were like completely at peace afterwards with transitioning and sort of like leaving their bodies. And it's so powerful. It's like it's really divine work what you're doing, like bringing this narrative back in, because those trials, they are some of the first trials, and nobody really ever talks about them.
Yeah, I feel like I think they may have been featured on Fantastic Fungi, but what I did not know was that the intention was to see if a spiritual experience would be beneficial or healing. I had no idea that that was actually the lens that they were looking at it through.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember his name now. Damn, it's just slipped from my. I'll remember at some point. It'll creep back in. But he's brilliant. One of the he's a clinical psychologist and researcher who spearheaded those trials. Is more of the sort of spiritual persuasion. But I mean, I enjoyed, I'm going to sound like a critic now. I enjoyed reading about the trials, but I also kind of find it quite funny that, a scientist is trying to quantify spirituality.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, that's subjective.
Well, this is the thing. So the questions were, multiple choice in terms of them rating, what they experienced, the feelings of awe, if it had a sort of numinous, or ethereal kind of feeling, all these
unquantifiable things, very esoteric
unquantifiable things, and also very esoteric sort of language, right?
Yeah.
And that's very subjective too. But at the same time, we shouldn't poo-poo it, because we're all for that sort of being returned. I think the reason that was kind of diminished is because that's not the way science works, and we see this all the time with scientists that try to push the boat out a little bit, then sort of just being bulldozed, their trials, and lose funding, and things are navigated back round to a more objective, quantifiable, materialist kind of more neurobiologically based sort of trial, which is definitely important. I mean, it's great reading about stats of people with serious illnesses, veterans, addicts. But at the same time, we cannot just focus these medicines. When we do that, it's minimizing these medicines, it's reducing these medicines down again to their molecular components, and putting them in the same bracket almost as pharmaceuticals. And they are so different. You cannot have a more different experience. They are not. The whole point is that these are natural medicines of the earth. And part of their healing technology is the imbued wisdom that they've contained for millennia. There's even theories that fungi they came on an asteroid from a different planetary system or whatever. So there's so much that we don't know, and I think what we're doing, this is the collective we, I would say, actually, Western Eurocentric culture, who I'm trying to remove myself from a little bit, in this decolonizing process, is doing what it usually does, commodifying, extracting, minimizing, reducing to fit a model that is profitable. And at the end of the day, that is what this is about. That's what the agenda is here. It's to slot them back in to a profit-making scheme. The side effect of that, yes, people will heal, but also only a proportion of people, only a certain segment of people that can afford extortionate prices getting psychedelic assisted therapy. This is why, I'm supporting movements like Decolonized Nature, who are stewarding a completely different approach, wanting, decriminalization on all entheogenic plants and fungi, and more than that, sort of fighting for our sovereign right to be able to use these medicines in a way that we see fit, that doesn't, that shouldn't be a criminal offense to grow your own medicine and weave it into your wellness regimen at home. I don't see why that's wrong. It's really interesting, I was speaking to you about the fact that I've been traveling and nomadic, and I mean, it didn't come as a surprise. It's not like I just figured it out, but it sunk in after a while. I was like, hang on, how come it's every country that this medicine hasn't ever been illegal in is a melanated country? Yet, ironically, it's those same people that were most harmed by the war on drugs. It's those same people that have been oppressed for millennia. It's those same people that have shepherded stewarded this medicine. So it's just very, again, I think we're just seeing the West do what it does best. And sorry, my angle is becoming quite political now. I'm hearing. But I just think that we all need to be wary. The reason I guess I'm being political is that this is over the course of the last handful of years of working with these medicines, it's been quite natural. They didn't shove me down the deep end, but I see them as agents of change. I see them as they're kind of mini anarchists, if you think about it.
Totally. I love that.
They literally pull your whole view of the world apart and go, what are you going to do now? Right. And after your first one, you kind of come back down to earth and you're like, whoa, okay, I might have to shift, some things around. And then, 4 or 5 years later, you are, an extreme activist kind of.
Oh my God, you're totally right.
The Western.
It's so true.
Diving deep into spirituality.
I love what you said too about them being sentient, because Ellen and I talk about that all the time. I feel like when I work with them, I'm like going to hang out with a friend. I'm like, what adventure are we going to go on today?
Yeah, and like change,
really
right?
honoring, what medicine they have to share with me in that moment and what it is that I need to receive. And it just, like, the more you talk about it, the more I'm like, oh yeah, it's so fascinating, because that to me feels like a component of this medicine that has to be really revered and stay sacred, because you really can't control them. Right. And so if you're taking it in sort of a clinical prescription sort of way, it's like there's just no way to fully predict like what that experience is going to be like.
Yeah, there's no way to also like homogenize it, right?
Right.
And I think that's the issue. Whenever Sam and I are working with the people that we serve and just kind of guiding them through even microdosing protocols, the first question is always, like, okay, what am I supposed to expect? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And our answer is always like, it's never the same for any one person, like for some people, it's going to activate you this way. And then for others, it's going to, slow you down so you can see it's just so different that you can't homogenize these experiences and have this sort of like, kind of like what you're saying, Buki, like a scientific approach where you can sort of like not guesstimate, but prove out that this is exactly what they do over and over and over and over again.
Right. Like, I just don't, it's like so hard for me to see how that can happen, because so much, it's exactly like you said, Buki, where they reflect back to you the energy that you bring, right? In whatever the medicine is for that for working with them in that moment. And if you're not setting a clear intention and you're taking all of the ritual out of it, it's just like there's no telling where
Yes,
they could take you.
completely. And this isn't to say that, you know, you have to do this medicine in a very ritualistic or a spiritual kind of way. But I mean, I say, what is spirituality anyway? It's inherent to each individual. I see spirituality about our relationship with people, you know, with nature, with the world, our outlook, the lens we use to relate to the world, and we can build on that, you know, but that's kind of where it starts, really. And I think that these medicines are about returning us to our autonomy, our own innate way of knowing, to a remembering, and even the most scientific of psychologists will all say, they are all agreeing on one point, that actually what heals you, apart from, you know, let's use psilocybin for example, which is a tryptamine, apart from the way it affects your neurons in terms of enabling neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, outside of that, it's our own inner healing intelligence that does the work of healing us. You know, because that engagement and neuro activity is only doing a fraction of the work. That's not what does the primary of the healing, you know. And to focus on that only, I think that the reason the focus is primarily on that is because that's the only thing that science can really quantify, you know. So I hear you, and it is a shame. It's I think things are going to shift in multiple directions, though. This is just the beginning. I mean, things are sort of snowballing in terms of the popularity of them in you know, mainstream culture. This is also due to all the findings in the trials, but I think what we're also seeing is a lot happening at a grassroots level. People building or putting together these initiatives, things like, you know, decriminalized nature, for example, that, you know, has only existed for a handful of years, and lots of other movements. So I that have intersections with psychedelic medicine. Even the whole decolonized movement is sort of starting to, you know, it ties into how we decolonized our healing. So I think that there's potential for the narrative to sort of shift or broaden, at least, and that's what I'm basically trying to champion. Not a complete eradication of Western thought and science and the research that's been done here. No, just bringing things into balance, so we don't have this hierarchical, you know, dominant, homogenous narrative that just blankets everything else and minimizes and oppresses the voices of the people that have been working with these, you know, sacred tools, medicines for millennia.
Yeah.
So
I think this is why your voice is so powerful and needed. You know, I feel like there's a small, and maybe because my perspective is always kind of, I feel like I have to seek out people who share this kind of perspective. And for me, it's like, you know, finding the voices that are speaking out and about, you know, decolonizing healing. I feel like it's more difficult for me to find those, or just slightly more challenging to find those voices than it is, you know, the voices that are talking about the scientific aspect of, you know, decriminalization or this, you know, psychedelic movement. I'm really actually curious what even started you on this path of like getting
So
into
fascinating.
entheogenic medicine and finding, I mean, I feel like the plants kind of find us in many ways too, you know.
they
But
do, Ellen. They actually, and psilocybin actually found me. I mean, I wouldn't start off with that. I'll start off with what led me to them, which was your question, right? What led me to this work? And you know, it's a bit of a delicate subject in that, you know, I came to this, it requires me sharing a bit more intimately about my personal history. And I'm happy to do that. And sorry, I lost my thought there. I just kind of had a bit of a mental freeze, overthinking what I want to share. But yes, talking about what led me to this medicine, yes, you know, I came to them by way of my own healing journey. And on reflection now, you know, looking back at the course of my journey, I'm still on it. I see healing as a path, you know, not a destination. It's an ongoing process, right? It's a life's work. And looking back, I see it also as an initiation process, you know, which is quite a positive way to kind of reflect on some of the traumas that I experienced and the battles and the life challenges that I had to go through. But yeah, I due to my childhood, and you know, I had quite a disruptive upbringing, magical in some ways. I was born in West Africa in the early 80s, at a time when, you know, Nigeria is one of the biggest densely populated countries, rich in oil and natural resources. But, you know, I was born, 33 decades after they just gained independence. You know, this was under imperialist rule for a few centuries. So I think I kind of came into this world at a time when things were sort of shifting. And I really believe that the part of my journey has been to experience one way of life, you know, indigenous to Africa, born on the motherland. This is, you know, quite proud of that fact, because science has proven that basically all of human life originated on that continent. Wow. So that the richness of that, you know, being connected to that land is embedded and imbued in my DNA. This is why I'm so proud of that. And actually, this medicine has started excavating all of that for me and bringing it right to the surface, putting me in touch with my ancestors. But I unfortunately was led to it through a lot of childhood trauma, racial trauma, oppression, due to my background. You know, I didn't have a privileged background at all. I used to feel so much shame at sharing the fact that I actually kind of grew up in poverty for a huge portion of my life. I really struggled. My father passed away when I was quite young, and you know, that was the beginning of, you know, a psychic wound that never healed, because I couldn't really grieve because I had to look after my sister, and my, you know, mum was struggling, and it was this battle. We just moved countries and had no support whatsoever, and at 12 years old I had to grow up pretty fast, and was responsible for things that I shouldn't have been. And bless my mum, you know, looking back now, I see a lot of the wounding. We unfortunately have a bit of a toxic relationship, but this is due to intergenerational trauma. You know, I see the traumas that were perpetuated between us, between her and her family, her mother. So yeah, without going into too much detail, a good amount of turbulence, trauma, pain and struggle meant that by my mid-20s, I was a nervous wreck. I hadn't healed. I had so much repressed, and it all kind of came to the surface. And at 27, I was diagnosed with depression, and that was an ongoing battle till my early 30s, which is when I decided to take my healing into my own hands, because everything that I tried before hadn't really worked. I wasn't a huge fan of antidepressants, and you know, therapy, counseling that I received just barely scratched the surface, because my wounds were very deep. I mean, and in hindsight, I understand now. I understand now, only now even, because I still have very frustrating conversations with my therapist where I'm like, why am I paying for this? You're not actually helping me. I just need to go back to the medicine. And then, because there's nothing like psilocybin for allowing you to see the roots of your trauma. It doesn't fix you, but that understanding, I mean, wow, what a learning experience. It's been a PhD in education. And in that healing process also enabled my brain the capacity to then sort of start assimilating and absorbing more information. I feel like actually since I've started this journey, that the amount of reading and self-education that I've done probably constitutes, I don't know, multiple degrees.
Gosh, I believe it.
Yeah, totally.
I totally believe it.
It's because it kind of just awakens your intellect, your creativity, everything. It's that reignition of everything that makes us these powerful spiritual beings that we are. That we've kind of forgotten that though, because we become so reliant on external things to fix us all the time, so my journey has really been one where the medicine has initiated me by way of enabling me, reconnecting me to my heritage, my history, my ancestors, my innate way of knowing, making me realize what an animist I am at heart, and we all are, really, connecting me to my spiritual self, waking me up in terms of my psychic ability. I mean, it's just been expansive. So I'm just grateful. I'm in deep gratitude to spirit, to Mother Nature, to the gatekeepers of this medicine, to our cosmos for creating the magic that they are. That I hope that kind of gives you an insight without sort of giving you a long list of my wounds, quote unquote. You get an idea of what led me to it. And I just want to share a tidbit of magic, actually, how exactly they came to me. So when I decided to take this, I was just like, right, I was at a bad point because it was recurring and almost living like a recluse, just because it was pretty bad, and my depression was really, really bad at times. Functional in that I could get work done, but pretty much nothing else. And I deep dived into Vipassana meditation and then started going on these retreats. And it was one of my first, I think, 2 or 3 retreats. I went up into the hills to Portugal on this Vipassana, which is, these retreats where you don't speak to anyone whilst you're there.
Yeah, I did one of those.
I did one at the start of the pandemic, or I actually walked into the pandemic lockdown after my Vipassana retreat, but it changed my life truly.
Yes. So I mean, wow, talk about it's sensory deprivation. That's why I, opened my eyes to my world up to sensory deprivation and the magic that kind of initiates. But on my last day on this retreat, I think it was a 7-day one, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I hadn't dreamt at the peak of my depression. I remember recalling that the last dream I'd had was I don't know, 2-3 years ago. This is something that people don't speak about when you're depressed. Basically, my synapses, my whole neurobiological, framework was dysfunctional. Your whole, your mental, region is not functioning properly. And actually, it's a side effect of chronic depression, losing the ability to dream. I woke up with this insane psychedelic dream.
Wow.
The mushrooms came. No, it was crazy. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, regurgitated this dream into my, the audio as an audio clip on my phone, and realized, the next day I was like, so I have to go and find mushrooms. Apparently, that was basically the message that I there was some sort of wizardy person who took me on a journey like into, I don't even know where I was. We were like this galactic journey, and to find magic mushrooms. That was what the dream was about.
Whoa.
So I woke up and was just like, I got to go and find them.
Wow.
And and then that was it. I think a few weeks later I bought all the stuff, started growing them, and the rest is history. I mean, Adventures in Om didn't kind of come into being till a little bit afterwards, but that's how things got started for me. It was crazy.
So I'm so fascinated, as you were starting to work with the plant medicine, like what did that process look like for you? Because I feel like the way that I work with them now is so different than how I worked with them when I first started. And it's always such an interesting journey.
Same. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's the case for a lot of Westerners, if you don't mind me calling us that.
Yeah.
I think, we didn't grow up, our whole lives in an Indigenous setting that use them. So we wouldn't, I'd had experiences with other psychedelics, not necessarily I called them psychedelics purposely, not entheogens. Well, I don't know. It's really silly, really. I have this split between the synthetic ones and the earth-based ones. But really, they're all magical, substances. But to answer your question, Sam, I think the difference, or what it looked like for me, I was very disciplined. I was very rigid. And the reason for that is because I was seriously still just, I was still quite ill. So I was taking my mental health very seriously and didn't want to push the boat out. But I tell you, I was such a nerd. I had, I've got like Stanislav Grof's books on transpersonal psychology, piles of Terence McKenna, watching, because I just needed to geek out to understand, everything. I was following all the accounts on social media. And this was already a handful of years ago, so there weren't even really that many. Things have only just sort of boomed in the last, I'd say, 3 years or so in terms of the psychedelic space. So rigid in that I thought I wanted to microdose, and then after a lot of research and comparing notes with people, I started attending integration circles, listening into other people's experiences. I then decided to sort of dive down the deep end. I think my very first experience, I followed I feel silly saying it now, but it's a route most people go down. I followed the John Hopkins route, made my playlist, got my blindfold, lay on the sofa. It was just, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's actually nothing wrong with that. And I think if you're actually working, and this isn't, notes for DIY, everybody listening. I say that specifically, if you are suffering from, a treatment resistant illness or any sort of serious illness of any kind, it's definitely a good idea to seek medical advice. I didn't myself. I bought loads of books and listened to podcasts and just decided to do it on my own. Which, to be fair, in hindsight now, it had its risks, but I was very cautious. Like I said, I was very rigid. I think I started off with 3.5, I think was my first dose, and it was magical. It was incredible. It was powerful, challenging, but also awe-inducing. It was everything. I cried, I laughed, I was scared, I felt loved up. It really was a full spectrum experience, and I was hooked. I remember, because I was growing them at the time, I would talk to them as I was spritzing them, every day, telling them what I wanted them to help me with, telling them my woes, telling them what I wanted to heal, and And they spoke back at me, you know, they through the first journey, you know, they really listened, and they showed me what I needed to see, and then also perspectives beyond that, things that I have only been able to integrate years later, because actually, and I know this is going to go down the, even though I hate the word woo woo end, but you know, kind of, they open me up psychically. They show me visions of things that haven't happened yet, and it's taken me catching up with myself, you know, as in like being in the future, to realize, oh, hang on, you know, this, I experienced this on my journey 3 years ago. You know, even one of the places I came to in Jamaica, I arrived there late. I woke up in the morning and I was in this kind of tree house that's, you know, at sort of tree height level, you know, the level of the bird. I was, you know, woke up and was on my balcony and facing birds in the branches. And I'm talking huge giant trees here, you know, banyan trees and things. And remember the journey that I'd had, about 4 years ago, where I was in this, and I knew in the journey, I was like, I'm in some sort of futuristic utopia. I definitely recognized the place, you know, and was just, because it was just a brief moment on the journey itself, you know, it didn't last very long. It's like a little insight, you know, like flashes that you get in your dreams too, and you only remember briefly. So you know, it was quite confusing at the beginning. So I'm trying to circle back to your question. I kind of go on these tangents. I apologize.
It's okay. That's how the mushrooms work.
I know, exactly.
But the integration was difficult at the beginning, because so much of it doesn't make any sense. You know, you make sense of a portion, but the rest you're just like, whoa, okay,
totally.
Insight. But what do I do with that? What do I see? I'll give you another example. My very first journeys, and I think I only just admitted this kind of publicly the other day. They gave me an insight to the war that's happening in Ukraine. And that was like 3 years ago, you know, and I'd known, even when COVID kind of came along, I was having all these chats, my friends freaking out, going, I think there's going to be a war. There's going to be a war. I've been saying, you know, most of my best friends have just been, you know, kind of wrinkling their foreheads at me for a while. And then obviously we're in the midst of a war now. I say we, but you know, it's our culture. It's our, you know, we're one, aren't we? So yeah, in terms of that, I voiced that because unfortunately I had been living with a little bit of paranoia for a while. Is that something I needed to integrate? You know, trying to understand, was that from the past? Is that historic war I was seeing? Is it future war? Now I understand, you know, and there have been multiple other scenarios where they've shown me things that are now coming into play. And so then obviously also a whole, well, it takes time. I think we have one thing that isn't spoken so much about with integration. I mean, I think we casually say, take time, you know, take your time, but no one really speaks to the fact that actually some aspects you might not be able to integrate for years.
Yes.
You know, for years. And the idea is to just leave that window. What I say to the people I work with and sort of coach is that always leave the window of opportunity open for the message to sort of come through later, for it to click, fit in, that puzzle piece to be found, rather than just as something that is just, you know, psychedelic kind of trip candy that doesn't mean anything, you know.
Trip candy.
That's such a great term for it. You know, you sharing this actually just made me realize something about the mushrooms I don't think I quite realized before. But Sam and I have talked a lot about time bending recently. And, you know, like, as we all know, time isn't linear. And I just wonder, in these moments of like kind of prophetic vision, if somehow the mushrooms are actually able to spend that time and take you into it's like you're actually seeing or
You're actually
witnessing
there.
the true
Yeah.
nature of
Yes.
time, you know?
Yes.
Oh, so wild. My whole
It
body is like
reminds
lighting
me
up.
of, yeah, it kind of reminds me of like talking about like a very westernized approach, which is definitely Joe Dispenza's approach, but he talks about too in these workshops that he does with his guests, where they'll like go into these moments of um, like spontaneous healing, and where all of a sudden everything in their energetic bodies and their physiological bodies just sort of like realigns. And it's kind of like that, right? Where it's like they just have this connection to something that's happening that's so visceral and real that like the quantum creates it.
Completely. And I respect Joe Dispenza. In fact, I loved his book How to Be Supernatural.
Oh yeah, I
Oh
know.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so just so mind-blowing. I read that on my journey, you know, before sort of
That was one of the first books I read.
He actually is, I should thank him for, he led me to meditation by way of, you know, his breathing exercises.
Me too.
And I realized,
oh
I was
my
like,
God. That's so funny.
Yeah, it's like, this is pranayama. So then I was like, actually, let's start with, so even though and I'm saying that, I just wanted to touch on that because I heard you sort of say, oh, it's going back into the West, because so after my, you know, since getting into Vipassana properly, and I'm now trained Hatha yoga teach, even though I don't actually teach so much at the moment, but practice yoga, started looking at him with different eyes. I was like, actually, you're kind of a yogi, aren't you? You just don't use the same terminology. And he is, you know, he's coming at it from a Western medical kind of lens, but also he's profoundly spiritual, and isn't afraid of taking things, you know, what happened to him, his whole healing process defies the laws of science.
And he's been able to show other people how to do that for themselves too through meditation, which is so powerful.
Yes completely. And also, just to address what you shared, Ellen, about time travel, you know, I think I vocalized this. I did a little post a month or so back after one of the integration circles, you know, just because I was just so in awe and at what I'd received and heard from others, and was joining dots with some of my experiences. And yeah, it was just like, actually, the kind of conversations I want to be having in the space and in the panel, obviously there are things that are more worthy of our attention and focus right now, you know, things like equity and inclusion and the, you know, colonization that's happening and all of that. But at the same time, can we please talk about the time travel aspect? Because I do actually feel that they allow for that. And I think, you know, all it takes is some more out there scientists to do this research. And you know, I'm gathering them up already. You know, Dispenza's one. I don't know if you've heard of Rupert Sheldrake, who's basically
amazing.
You know, like, what a legend, right? You know, and I kind of want to just be like, Rupert, do a study on time.
So cool.
Please. You know, but he's already, I mean, he's brilliant because he is spearheading experiments and research on psychic ability. And I think it's only a matter of time till we sort of weave that in. But we are also limited, you know, by science to a certain degree. This is the most frustrating thing. You know, science is kind of keeps catching up with spirituality and spiritual thought, I will say, you know. So it's I agree with you. I definitely think that there's so much that we don't know. I think that there's potential, you know, with things like morphic resonance and all of this, that they take us to different dimensions, you know, and in those dimensions we're experiencing not alternate I don't know whether it's alternate realities, versions of our reality, you know, that have happened or haven't happened yet, or have historically happened. I think it's, you know, it just challenges they challenge everything that we think we know about our existence. Full stop. You know, I was just thinking, how do I voice this? About time, about our history, about our own sort of molecular makeup, even, you know.
Yeah.
And they're just incredible. We've got so much to learn, and I think this is why I'm so for championing alternative ways and views of approaching them and using all of these different lenses, because the more homogenized the discourse gets, the narrative becomes, the more rigid our ideas of how they work become, which is the complete antithesis of what they want us to do, you know, or how they want us to heal ourselves.
Right.
They want us to tear down these rigid structures and rebuild. This is what I feel like they're inviting us to do. You know, to work, to reconnect with Mother Nature, to reconnect with each other, our ancestry, our roots, to creatively imagine and envision other ways of being as humans, so that we can work at, you know, eradicating conflict and healing, you know, in the full expanse of what that word means.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's, to me, honestly, like, I feel like this work is the true space program that we all need. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It really is this kind of travel, you know, this, and I see it as, you know, it is exploration. It's deep quantum exploration that will liberate all of us, you know, and in different ways too. But yeah, I don't know. I can't stress that enough, where I feel like, there, it just seems so simple. Like, the answers are right in front of us. And yet, you know, like most things in life, I think we've created our own sort of prisons around, you know, and we, as in the collective we too. I'm in all of your work, all of your healing work, and in all the ways, I mean, you're so well read and well studied. And I appreciate where your heart is, because it's bringing this out into the world in a way that, you know, like people really need this voice, your voice. I think the collective really needs your voice. But I'm curious, like, of all the things that you've studied and learned and received through these journeys, and this healing work, what is that piece of wisdom that you feel has, like, really transformed your life? And I know this is a really big question.
Wow. Oof, that is a big one. The bit of wisdom that has transformed my life. So this wisdom, I think, again, I'll say, was kind of more of remembering, as in the medicine, you know, I was going to say transmuted, no, sort of showed me, yes, of course. And it was that everything is imbued with spirit. Everything is sentient and alive. And that for me was transformative, because that was the opening. This was still when I was on using my sorts of science lens, science and psychology lens on this work, to really, it was the window that opened to deep dive into spirituality in all its forms, you know, exploring, you know, right to the beginnings of, you know, animistic cultures, to then going ahead steamrolling with my yoga. And I'll say I'm a greedy person, in that, you know, when an idea sort of sprouts, I kind of, in the same way I keep talking about using all these lenses, I like to digest from a range of different sources. So I spent a lot of time also just, you know, reading about different spiritual kind of practices, I guess, in a way trying to formulate my own spirituality and figure out what it was that I believed in. And then got to the point where it was like, actually, I think what the message was, what spirit was trying to show me, is that I am it. I am a spiritual being. I don't need to follow one text one way. I myself, leaning into myself, can create my own innate spirituality, if that kind of makes sense. I mean, it's not to say that you know, I'm a huge fan of Hindu culture, love reading the Bhagavad Gita, like find it such a magic. I microdosed to reading it. It was so magical.
Amazing.
Have you microdosed in, that's something I actually need to speak to you about, Ellen, a bit more, because I haven't spent so much time microdosing, but yeah, reading and digesting audiobooks whilst microdosing.
Oh my God, that was like the first 8 months of my journey with mushrooms, was taking microdoses, going on like 2.5, 3 hour walks and just listening to audiobooks. I think I read 40 books on the quantum physics and like spirituality and different religions and ancient history of I mean, it was insane. You'll love it. It's the most incredible way to absorb information.
Yes. I love that, Sam. Oh my God. I thought I was the only nerd.
No, oh my God. It's so awesome.
Yeah, that's yeah. So it's right on. So yeah, that's the I think that's it, because it was just, I believe that. I do. I mean, I saw it in the way that they showed me, you know, my crystals came alive, my sage came alive. And I was just like, oh my God, everything is alive with spirit. And I say this as in, you know, spirit is consciousness in a sense. I don't know what word you want to call it, but there is consciousness in everything that grows and has, you know, even, you know, I'm sat here and I'm looking at my wooden table. At some point this was alive and breathing. It was a tree, you know. So to think that it's science that has kind of divided us from this way of looking at the world. It has really reduced everything down and split us away from spirit and our inherent spiritual nature. And I know I'm going to sound like an uber spiritualist now by saying this, but I really see that as one of the primary problems and the basis for all our problems in the world today. I see it as the fundamental one. And so so it has to be that in terms of what has sort of radicalized and changed my worldview. But I say it's a remembering, because it's not, it felt like a shock, but it felt like I already knew, you know. It's one of those feelings because it's embedded in us. And alongside that came memories flooding back of me being a kid and playing in the dirt in Nigeria and connecting with the earth and feeling its feelings, you know. I remember as a child, like feeling that I could feel the earth sort of being in pain at times. And you know, and that was just me as a kid. That it isn't a false memory. I can consciously remember having that sort of line of thought as a 5-year-old. So I think it's embedded in us. We just are conditioned and socialized away from it. Yeah.
Well, as somebody who literally I burn incense offerings to my house every day. I very much believe in that practice too. And I thank her for her protection and just being able to contain and help us like grow even our connection and love within her space, you know, like, and all the elements that it took to create her. Like, I fully believe everything that you just said. And yes, I feel like that is why these medicines are so powerful and so incredibly healing, because there is no denying your spiritual nature and the consciousness that is in everything when you're speaking or in relationship with the sacred mushroom or any of these other entheogenic medicines. God, Like I truly could talk to you forever. Like
I know.
and listen to
I'm
you
like,
talk.
I just feel like we barely scratched the tip of the iceberg here.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel the same. I know that I've gone on lots of different tangents. I always think, oh my God, am I the best person or the worst person to invite onto a podcast? I talk so much, which is a great thing, but then I don't let you ask any questions.
No, this was awesome. I mean, I'm like, okay, I'm like in class right now with Buki.
Yeah, everything is divine. I love it.
It's so good. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
good.
It was.
No, thank you both.
I hope this is the first of very many, many conversations to come.
Yeah, I would love to come back. Maybe we can theme it next time.
Yeah,
a specific topic. Yeah.
Like time travel.
Yes, let's do it.
So up for that. Thank you both.
Music for Woo New is composed by Adam Miller.